Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to create some code in the DOM, and then we're going to learn how to copy that code using our Async Clipboard API. Now, if you want to go ahead and create some pre-tags inside, we're then going to write some code. Now, we're also going to give this a class of source, and then we're going to inject that source into a destination DOM node in a future lesson. So for now, what we don't want to do inside the pre-tag is actually indent it. If we write the code right at the beginning, this will then keep the formatting nice. Now you can write any kind of code that you want here. I'm going to add a class called pizza, and we're going to say it extends food. We can give it some kind of constructor, and we can say private name is going to be of type string. Now it doesn't really matter how much code we write in here, and you can see that we have the code when we save things out. Now what I'm going to do is add some style tags to this so we can neaten things up and make it a bit more fancy and like a real life code editor. So let's create a class for source. We're going to create a quick background color. Now for this, I've chosen a hex code of 15181 and then E. We want to then align the text to the left. We can set a maximum width of 95%. To give it a bit of breathing room, we're going to give it some margin, 25 pixels at the top, followed by an auto value either side. With the font, let's bump this up a bit to 16 pixels. We'll make the text white so it can stand out on our dark background. Give it some nice padding to push the text inwards. So we can add a border radius of 5 pixels. Now to ensure that this sizes correctly, we're going to use box sizing and then border-box. So this is going to adjust our box model and take our padding into account to the width so we can have a nice max width. If we were to remove this, we can then see it goes full width. So we're not going to cover what box sizing does, but essentially this is something that I like to apply to all of my elements. So now that we have our pre, what we can do is just move our HTML tags up even more so that our code is then formatted even better. And even though it looks slightly untidy, this is the best way to actually achieve some code that follows all the nice indentations. So then when we go to copy and then paste, we'll actually keep the same formatting. Otherwise, if we were to do something like this and indent the code as if we were writing inside our text editors, we would then see something like this and this huge gap at the beginning. So we don't really want to do this. So now that we have a pre-class, what we're going to do is create some quick buttons. We can say button type of button. We'll give this a class of copy, and inside we can just simply say copy. We can then duplicate this and change it over to paste. Now we're not going to hook up the paste just yet. We're going to learn how to, in fact, copy and then programmatically paste. So here we've got copy, paste, everything is looking great, which means that we can go down and start building out our functionality. Inside of the init function, we're going to create some constants. So here we're going to say const copy equals document query selector, and then we can ask for that copy button. We can then create a callback. So here we're going to create a callback called copy to clipboard. Now this is going to be an asynchronous function, and this is because we're going to momentarily start using the async await syntax. But first I want to show you how this write text is in fact a promise, so we can learn the APIs as per the specification using .then, and then refactor things to a more modern syntax using async await and a try catch. So let's bind an event. We want to bind a click event, and when we click on this particular button, we of course want to then copy it. So we can reference our copy to clipboard. Now one thing that we're going to do just before this, and this is something quite nice, is add this content editable attribute. So what it will allow us to do is then start changing the contents of this. If we save this out, we can take a look. So we could, for example, change this over to private toppings, and this could, for example, be a string array. So this will allow us to then see the differences when we start hitting copy and paste. Otherwise, we'll see the same code over and over. So this is a nice HTML5 addition, as well as this content editable attribute. And all we simply do is just add it anywhere we want, and it becomes completely editable. And I'm sure you agree, this is much nicer than editing inside a text area, for example. So this gives us the ability to have our copy button listen to a click event. So inside, we now need to use our navigator.clipboard, and then we're going to look at this write text method. So first things first, let's go and say hello clipboard. And you can see that this returns a promise. So we can say dot then, we can then pass in, and you can see that we have onFulfilled, so when the promise is finished. And we also have a second argument, which is if there is in fact an error. So if we say console.log copied, we can also look at the event object that comes back. And this is in fact a value, but we're going to just stick it, but we'll just call this the E for event. So if we go and press copy, you can see that we have copied and then an undefined value. Now inside the promise callback, we can then pass in an onFulfilled, which is when our copy event has completed. And if, for example, there is an error, we can also pass in a second callback. So if we were to do something like this, where we say console.log, we can say copied. Otherwise, we can run another callback that says failed to copy. We save this out, this gets reformatted onto multiple lines. So this is using the old school approach, if you want to call it the old school approach. What we can do is press copy. This then gives us a nice log to say copied, and we can, for example, paste in, and we have hello clipboard. We can then change this to whatever we want. We can then press copy again, paste it in the console, and you can see that our writing text method is now writing as per the Clipboard API. This is nice, but there's one more final thing that I want to do, and that's just quickly refactor this over to an async await syntax. So we can change our function definition to an async function, and that means that we now need to use a try and then a catch. We're going to simply await it, and instead of using a dot then and a callback, we're just going to say console log copied, because at this point in time, if the try is successful, we know that things went okay. Otherwise, we're going to catch the error, and we can move our console log failed to copy, and we could, in fact, if we want, pass in any error messages. So we can clear up what we had before, save things out, and this will then give us hello async await clipboard. We can then press copy, we can then paste, and you can see that we have hello async await clipboard. So this is a nice syntax. I think it's really nice. We have the try, we have the catch. It kind of reads a lot nicer. We don't have to have nested functions. And it also makes our error handling a bit cleaner. So that's it for this lesson. We just learned how to write some text to the clipboard. I would try not to add too many complicated things such as HTML and this type of content to the clipboard, and just keep things nice and simple. If you do, for example, want to get more complex, there is a write method instead of a write text method, which you can use instead. So that's it for this lesson. Let's dive into the next one, where we're going to learn how to read from our clipboard and also investigate this permissions API.